The light showed up on the third night, and at first I thought it was a reflection. The platform's running lights catching something metallic on the water below. Then it moved. Not with the current, against it, slowly, like something that knew exactly where it was going. I stood on the gangway for maybe 30 seconds, watching it. Then I went back inside. The coal that burns. 3 weeks into a decommissioning job, your sense of strange gets recalibrated. Nothing feels normal on a North Atlantic platform in late October. The cold is a living thing. The sea moves in ways that don't care about you specifically. And when you've been breathing recycled air long enough, you start seeing patterns in noise. The guys on the night crew had been reporting lights in the water for 2 days. Rodriguez said it was a whale, maybe a school of something bioluminescent. Hemi just kept his head down and said nothing at all. I filed it away under tiredness and bioluminescence and moved on. The platform was an old production rig, 200 nautical miles west of the Faroe Islands. It had been offline for 8 months by the time our crew came on. Our job was subsurface inspection, structural assessment, a couple of cuts on the lower column bracing. Work I'd done a dozen times on a dozen different structures in a dozen different seas. I was the primary diver. That was the job. That was the whole job. October 30th. I remember because I'd written it on the top of my equipment check sheet that morning. Same as always. Date, time, dive number. Dan keeps a paper log too. He's old-fashioned like that, Dutch. 20 years, offshore. The kind of man who has 3 backup procedures for every backup procedure. He was already at the dive control console when I came into the operations room at 600. Coffee in one hand, pen in the other, writing something in that tight, careful handwriting. Morning, he said without looking up. Rodriguez see any more lights last night? 2 sightings, nothing on sonar. He clicked his pen. You know what I think it is? Bioluminescence. Bioluminescence, he agreed. Above the console, nailed at a slight angle, there was a small carved wooden fish. I'd noticed it on the first day, but never asked. It was old. The wood had gone grey, the grain raised and smooth from years of hands touching it. I asked him that morning what it was. He was quiet for a moment. Then, my grandmother made it, after my grandfather went missing. Missing at sea. North Sea, 1971. He capped his pen. She carved it after. Believe the sea takes people who aren't paying attention to the old warnings. What warnings? He thought about it. I never asked, he said. I was 9. I just liked the fish. I suited up. I tapped the face of my dive computer 3 times. Right index finger, 3 sharp taps on the housing, and went into the water. The thing about saturation diving is that you live between worlds. You spend weeks in a hyperbaric habitat, breathing heliox. Your body saturated with pressure, so you can descend without wasting time on decompression cycles. The habitat is a steel cylinder with a bunk, a fold-down table, a porthole the size of your palm. You eat there, sleep there, talk on a distorted comms line to people who sound like they're underwater even when they're topside. By the 3rd week, you stop thinking about the surface as a real place. It becomes abstract. The job is real. The water is real. Everything else is a rumor. I'd been diving for 11 years. I'd done saturation work in the Gulf, in the South China Sea, in the Norwegian sector. I'd been through the Edda incident 3 years back. A line failure, a current, 30 meters of unexpected freefall, and my dive partner Christopher dead at the bottom of a compression chamber before anyone could explain what went wrong. I wasn't afraid of the water. I'd made my accommodation with it. The water takes what it takes. You work around it. What I was afraid of was not working. The moment the checklist ran out, the moment I surfaced and had nothing to do but sit still and let my own thoughts catch up with me. That was the thing. That was what the tapping was about. Though I would not have called it that. It was just a habit. Just something I did. I went down on a short line, following the column to the seafloor at 160 meters. Standard inspection work, muck and darkness, and the structural steel going past me in the beam of my helmet lamp. I locked the welds, checked the anodes, noted a hairline fracture on a secondary brace that would need evaluation. My computer logged depth, time, gas supply. Everything nominal. That's when the readings started. I was ascending, maybe 20 meters off the seafloor, when my computer showed a depth discrepancy. It said I was at 212 meters. The seafloor was at 160. I'd been ascending continuously for 4 minutes. I stopped. Checked the housing. No condensation, no crack. Checked the redundant computer on my other wrist. Same reading. 212 meters and dropping. The water temperature was wrong too. North Atlantic at this location and depth runs around 4 degrees Celsius. My computer said 2. Then 1.8. Then something it displayed as a small blinking square that I'd never seen before and wasn't in the manual. I told myself, equipment malfunction. I told myself, nitrogen narcosis. Even though I was breathing heliox and narcosis wasn't physiologically possible. I told myself, fatigue, stress, the low-grade unreality that comes with weeks in a pressure habitat. I had 100 rational explanations lined up like tools in a kit. Then I saw the light. It was below me, maybe 40 meters, maybe 60. In water, this dark distance gets elastic. It wasn't the blue-white of a helmet lamp. Helmet lamps have a warm component, a slight yellow cast. This was cold, pure. The color of something that has never been warm. It didn't diffuse. That was the first wrong thing. Light in water diffuses. You get a halo, a scatter, a soft edge bloom where the beam meets the particles. This light was directional. A single cold beam pointing away from me into the dark below. I could see a figure holding it. A man. Walking on the seafloor. At a depth my equipment said I could not be at. Walking slowly, unhurried, the way you walk when you have no reason to hurry. He held the lantern slightly behind him as he moved. Not like he was carrying it, but like he was trailing it. The way you might drag a hand through water. The light fell forward, away from him, toward wherever he was going. I noticed even then that the light cast no shadow. A lantern held below a figure on a seafloor should throw a shadow upward behind it. Some dark shape against whatever the beam hit. There was nothing. The figure moved through his own light and left no absence behind him. I didn't call topside. I should have called topside. Instead, I descended. I knew I was following. I want to be clear about that. I knew. There was no moment of not knowing. My professional brain was still running, still logging, still producing rational explanations for every wrong thing. Equipment failure, visual anomaly, pressure-induced hallucination. But my body had already made a different decision. My fins were moving. My depth was increasing. I followed the light. The figure kept the lantern at exactly the edge of visibility, not close enough to see detail. too far to stop following. I tried twice to halt my descent. The first time, I got maybe 3 seconds of neutral buoyancy before my legs started again on their own. The second time I caught a line bracket on the platform column and held it until my knuckles went numb. 4 degrees Celsius is 4 degrees Celsius, regardless of what your computer says. And then I let go. I told myself it was nitrogen narcosis. I told myself it was the beginning of high-pressure nervous syndrome. I told myself I was ascending, that this was a controlled ascent, that the depth reading was faulty, and I was moving upward. The figure never looked back. Its shape was wrong in a way I couldn't isolate. Middle-aged, maybe. The silhouette had the breadth of someone who had been large once and was now simply enduring. It wore what looked like a long coat or a shroud or something that moved in a way that did not exactly match the current. When I managed to get slightly closer, I could see the face was turned away. When it turned back, just slightly, the profile was not the same profile I'd seen from behind. Not worse. Not monstrous. Just different. The features had rearranged themselves in the moment I couldn't observe them. I stopped trying to observe the face. Up on the surface, Dan's paper log said I'd been underwater for 3 hours and 40 minutes. My dive plan was for 40. He'd been trying to reach me on comms for the better part of 2 hours. Not a graded signal, not the crackling distance loss dropout you get in deep water. Silence. The line was live. His signal was transmitting. Nothing came back. He checked the umbilical connections twice, then a third time. He pulled Rodriguez off his bunk to look at the communications rig. Rodriguez found nothing wrong. Dan stared at the paper log. Then he looked at the wooden fish above the console. He'd never been a superstitious man. He believed in equipment and procedure and the tendency of bad outcomes to follow predictable chains of cause. He believed that people who trusted luck were people who hadn't worked hard enough at preparation. He told his grandmother as much once, and she'd looked at him the way old women look at young men who have not yet learned what the world contains. His hand moved towards the fish. He stopped it, picked up the comms instead. Solberg, respond. Silence. Maren, you need to respond. The line stayed dead. He kept talking anyway, because the alternative was to stop. I don't know when the figure stopped walking and became still. It happened between one moment and the next. I was following a moving thing, and then I was descending toward a stationary one, and the transition had no observable midpoint. He stood with the lantern held at his side, the cold blue light spilling forward, and waited. I stopped about 3 meters away. Up close, the light had a quality I can't properly describe. It flickered, but not the way flame flickers. Not randomly, not with the entropy of combustion. It pulsed almost, like breathing, like something contained in the lantern that was alive and aware of being contained. The man turned to face me fully. His face was weathered in a way that went past age. The kind of weathering that doesn't come from years, but from exposure, like driftwood, like stone. The eyes were pale, almost colorless, and they moved over me with an expression I recognized eventually as loneliness. Not the loneliness of a person who has been alone for a while. Something older, something that had curdled past self-pity into something else. Something that no longer distinguished between choosing to be with someone and simply ensuring they did not leave. He said something. I couldn't hear it clearly. His mouth moved, and the sound reached me the way sound reaches you in deep water. Muffled and slightly wrong, the frequencies absorbed. It might have been a name. It might have been an invitation. It might have been nothing but habit. The rote social ritual of a thing that had once been a man and still remembered the forms. I should have turned. I should have ascended. The light shifted. It turned toward me, directly, and for a moment it was all I could see. I surfaced. I know I surfaced, because I went through the correct sequence. Ascent, decompression stop, slow controlled rise. The platform coming into my helmet lamp beam from below. I saw the markings on the column. I saw the familiar rust pattern on the lower guide rail. I came up the ladder, cracked my helmet, breathed surface air. The platform was dark. Every running light was off. The console room was dark. The habitat was dark. The helideck was dark. No sound except the sea and the wind and the platform's normal working creak. I called out. My voice went nowhere, swallowed by the dark and the wind. I went into the dive control room. The console was dead. Dan's paper log was on the table. I could see it in my helmet lamp. The last entry was in his careful handwriting. Eddie's Ocean 314 underwater. No response on comms. Will attempt. And then the sentence ended. I picked up the log. The paper was dry. The ink was dry. I checked my dive computer. It said I had been underwater for 11 minutes. I understand now that I didn't surface. Or rather, I surfaced into the wrong place. You know, the Irish story about the man who carries the burning coal? The one the devil gave him after heaven turned him away. After hell turned him away, after every door closed. The coal gives him just enough light to see by, and not enough warmth to live by. And he walks with it forever, because there is nowhere to go, and no one who will take him in. He walks in the dark between the living world and the dead one, in the place that isn't either, where there is no reference point and no horizon and no reason to stop walking, because stopping would mean sitting with what you are. The lantern was a burning coal, not fire, just the last trace of fire held in something cold. When the light turned toward me and I saw nothing but blue, it passed through me. That's the only way I can describe it. The cold went inside me and through me, and what it left behind was not warmth, not pain, not any sensation I have a name for. It left behind a kind of stillness. The stillness I'd spent 11 years running from. I was not dead. I am not dead, I think. I was exactly where Jack had always been. The space between. The platform was real but not occupied. The water was real but not the water I knew. The dark was real and total, and it pressed in from all sides with no reference and no horizon. He was there. He stood a few meters away, the lantern in his hand, and he looked at me with that curdled centuries-old loneliness. He looked at me the way you look at someone you have finally, after a very long time, managed to convince to stay. He had not meant to be cruel. I believe that. The loneliness was genuine, and the loneliness was pitiable, and at some point, some unmarked point, somewhere in the long expanse of years, the thing that felt company and the thing that felt captivity had become the same to him. He did not know the difference anymore. He had not known the difference for a very long time. He held the lantern out. The light fell forward. I started walking. Dan found my dive gear on the platform 3 days later. Fins, helmet, umbilical. Everything laid out correctly. Equipment protocol. Everything as it should be. The umbilical had been disconnected at the manifold end, not cut. His paper log had an entry he did not remember writing. 0411, line dead. Second light reported below surface. He didn't remember reporting it. He didn't remember writing it down. On the fourth day, he was standing at the rail in the early evening, looking at the water the way you look at something you can't stop looking at, when he saw them. Two lights, moving below the surface, not with the current, against it. Slowly, with the unhurried patience of things that have no reason to hurry. Moving side by side, close enough that the light overlapped. The cold blue of the lantern and something else. Something that flickered with a slightly different cadence, a slightly different pulse. He watched for a long time, without thinking, without knowing why, without any conscious decision. He reached up and touched the wooden fish above the console. Once, twice, 3 times. He stood there, with his hand on the carving his grandmother had made, and he looked at the 2 lights moving below the water. And he did not call anyone. He did not log it. He did not look away. The boundary had already begun to blur for him. He did not know it yet, but the lights were there, and they were patient, and they were in no hurry at all. Some lights in the dark are there to guide you. Some are there because whatever's carrying them has learned that the difference between a guide and a lure is something only the living care about. If you ever find yourself following something you didn't decide to follow, something at the exact edge of your visibility, something that adjusts its space to keep you just close enough to keep going, stop, look back, make sure there's still something to go back to.